Hello everyone, welcome to The Budget Sportsman, and thank you so much for joining me on today's video. When it gets down to the end of the year, I really enjoy going back and looking through some of my favorite trail camera pictures and videos from the year. So in today's video, we're going to go ahead and take a look at some really neat trail camera pictures and videos, mostly that I got, but also some that my dad got on the same property that we both hunt. So sit back, relax, and enjoy, and I think there's going to be some really neat trail camera pictures and videos that you're going to enjoy. Alright, let's start off the video by looking at some of the little critters I captured this year on camera. Obviously, the main reason I run the trail cameras is for deer, but I really enjoy capturing some of the other animals in the woods that, to be honest, I often don't really get to see in person. Everything from raccoons and porcupines to an occasional coyote and even a fox this year. One of the things that I seem to get almost every year on camera, but I've never actually seen in person, is a fisher. This year was no different. I got a picture of a fisher, and then I also got a couple videos here. If you'll take a notice that it looks like the exact same video, but it's actually 2 days apart. So I got two different videos here, 2 days apart, of the fisher. Really cool. I'm moving into the deer now. One of my favorite things about running the trail camera is seeing the fawns in the spring. Here you can see we're into July, and I got a lot of fawn pictures. I just happened to pull one out here from July, but really enjoy seeing the fawns as they mature. Now this picture I found really interesting. I could not figure out what it was, but if you look really close at this deer's face, it looked like there was some sort of a black marking on its face. I never did figure out what it is. I didn't get this deer on camera again, so I don't know if it was just something on its face that washed off, or if there was some kind of discoloration. Never saw this deer in person or on camera again, but just thought it was a really unique picture. Of course, here we're now getting into July 12th. One thing I'll mention as I start looking at some of these buck pictures is that on the property that I hunt here, this is primarily private property pictures. The truth is we don't get a lot of bucks on our property until the rut hits. And so there's going to be very limited bucks, but here's July 12th, one of the first pictures I got of a buck there with at least a somewhat decent set of velvet antlers coming out. Here's another one. Again, where I hunt, this is actually a somewhat decent buck. It's obviously not a huge buck most places, but we don't have a lot of big bucks here, especially in the summertime. And so that means when you see a buck like this, you get excited. But then when you see a buck like this is pretty exciting. For us here in central Pennsylvania, a buck like this in velvet in the middle of July that's still got a lot of growing time, this is a pretty exciting deer to see. Now, I got him on camera this time here in the middle of July and did not see him again until much later, and got several nice bucks, one of which I think could potentially be this one later on during the rut. Now we are getting into the rut with this next clip, and this would be a nice buck we got, but it's pretty interesting. As you see, he looks like he's got a big 5-point frame on one side, counting his brow tine, and he doesn't have his other side at all. This is the only clip I ever got of this buck. Now, again, getting into the rut, we're into November 1st. This is the time of year that really starts picking up around this property, and you start seeing a pretty nice buck cruise by the camera there. Same day, a little later in the day. Don't think it's the same buck, but another pretty decent buck there, and he's just out getting a little snack right in front of the camera. Now this buck right here is pretty interesting. Take a look at his neck. I'll pause it for you. That's certainly not a 1.5 or even a 2.5-year-old deer in my estimation. I'm not great at judging deer age, but this looks like an older deer, and yet if you look at his rack, he really doesn't have much of a rack to speak of. He's a big 4-point with just barely a brow tine there on the one side. Here in Pennsylvania, we have to have 3 points on one side. The point has to be at least 1 inch to count. This buck is probably not legal as one that you would have a hard time saying that brow tine is even 1 inch to make it a legal shooter, even though he's a little bit of an older buck. Now, I'm not 100% positive, but this is a few days later at a different camera. I believe it's the same buck. As you can see, he's got that big Y on each side and no brow tine on the right side. Now, this next clip I think is super interesting as well. As you start off the clip, all you can see is the deer's nose smelling the camera. One thing I want to mention is I had checked the camera earlier that afternoon, and so I'm sure my scent was on the camera. This deer has his nose right up in it, and then he whirls and takes off, and you hardly get a good look at him. Now what I'll do is I'll play it back slow for you, and I want you to notice a couple things. First of all, he's got a really nice rack, but you'll notice there on his right side, he's got some sort of an indentation or hole in his antler near the G3, and I'm going to point that out again on a different video of this buck. Now this video was on the 24th. Let's take a look at a video that we captured on a different camera here in the middle of November. And you can see this guy's got a pretty nice rack for here in central Pennsylvania. This guy's a definite shooter. Any of us would be happy to shoot him for sure, but I want you to take a look at the size of his neck. And one thing I'll point out here, pause the video, is you see he's got that same hole in the side of his antler there by the G3 on the right hand side. Same buck as in the last video. The interesting thing is this buck was still in the area, but he never showed up by that other camera where he spooked after that night. This next buck is pretty unique. If you look at his right side there, he's got about 3 points all coming off the end. One sticking straight out, one up, and one down. Pretty unique buck. Not sure where he got that kind of genes. One thing you'll notice here is if you look very closely, as far as I can tell, he has no tail. This particular buck came through quite a few times in the course of several weeks. He's not that real big one we looked at a few minutes ago, but he's sure a nice one in the Pennsylvania books. The interesting thing is, by about the end of November, he disappeared. Never saw him again. Now I want to move over and look at a couple of pictures from a camera that I put out on public land. Now I set this camera up after I harvested my buck on private land in archery season, and I was planning to go hunt this exact spot for doe in the rifle season. And the funny thing is, the first time I checked the camera, it seemed like all that I saw were buck pictures. Eventually, I did actually get some doe pictures, and I actually went in there and did harvest a deer with my revolver in the rifle season. Now, here's a really interesting sequence of pictures I want to point out to you. This is actually the opening day of rifle season here in Pennsylvania, and I was not sitting there because I did not have a buck tag, and the opening day was buck only. But you'll notice here there's a couple of does that went by at 8:20 in the morning. And again, this is late November. I'm thinking the rut's over. There's going to be a lot of pressure on public land. And yet you can still see some sign of some rutting activity, because at 8:24, here comes a buck on the exact same trail. And then 10 minutes later at 8:35, here comes another buck down that exact same trail. Seems to me like one of those does may have been in heat, and those bucks were on the trail. Now, for Pennsylvania, this is a really nice buck, but for Pennsylvania public land in an area that gets a good bit of pressure, this was a really amazing buck to capture on camera. Never did get this guy on camera again, but I did see a really nice buck, very similar to him, the day I went in to check the camera. And one last picture here from that same spot, another buck. Seemed to be a lot of bucks going through that little funnel. Now, I've already made a video about this sequence of clips on my channel, but I just can't make a video about my favorite trail cam images of this year without including this. This is a clip here of 2 spikes having it out. Now, if you look at the time, it's 11:32, and 5 minutes later at 11:37, you can just see the back of a deer. Now, if you watch that other video, you'll know that one of these spikes actually killed the other, and I found the dead one just to the left of where the camera is pointing. And so you'll watch in these clips, the buck, which I assume here is the winner, is still standing over the body of the smaller buck that he killed. And at 11:42, still standing there. And then at 11:52, you can see that the winner has gone back to having a snack. And if you look really closely, you'll actually notice the blood on his antlers. He actually had pierced up through the chest cavity of the other buck and ended up killing it. Now, the last clip I want to show you is super cool. Again, this one goes credit to my dad for capturing this one, along with several others that I've already showed you. But if you haven't been watching my videos this year, you know that I saw an albino, and I saw it twice, but we never got it on camera. And just here a few days ago, my dad actually captured that albino on camera. It is a fawn, but look how pure white it is. It's just a great capture this year. Super excited to see that on camera toward the end of rifle season. So hopefully it survived, and we'll get to see it again next year. Hey everyone, I really hope you enjoyed some of those pictures and videos. Let me know down in the comments which was your favorite. And if you have a picture or video that you really want me to see that you got on one of your trail cameras, head on over to Facebook, look up The Budget Sportsman, and send me a message. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, remember to get off YouTube and get outdoors into God's great creation.